Okay, this is a real picture, and I have a lot of pictures because this is kind of hard to understand. So please stop me and ask questions if you don't understand. So basically, let's just go one more time with no labels. This is what kind of tissue? Dermal tissue, okay? This? No.
Vascular.
That's your vascular bundles, and then this, all this stuff inside, that's your ground tissue, okay? Is this a monocot or dicot? It is a dicot. And do you know whether it's from the root, the stem, or the leaves? You should know it's not from. Right, you know it's not the leaf, because you know what that looks like. You know it's not the root, because where is the vascular tissue in the root? In the center of the stele, okay? So this is a dicot stem, just to kind of help you narrow it down. What you're going to find, I'll go through the parts and then I have it for you. When a plant grows in width, it can only grow from the meristem. See this blue kind of ring right here? That is the meristem, okay? That is the stem cells that are going to actually produce new xylem and phloem, and that's how the plant grows in width, is it creates a new ring of xylem and a new ring of phloem. And it does that every year. So it is true that if you like cut through a tree and you count its rings, it will tell you how old the tree is. Because every year it gets a new ring of xylem, a new ring of phloem. We're going to talk about the phloem that sloughs off, so it doesn't keep that ring of phloem.
So does the leaf, the stem, and the root all have their own meristem?
No. I mean, the leaf, I don't really know that you call the leaf growth. I mean, as far, you don't call that meristematic tissue. That's a good question. I don't really know exactly like all, you know, the signaling that causes the leaf to grow.
But the stem and the root do. They have their own.
Yes. Yes, the root has its own meristem, which I showed you in the root tip, and the stem has its own meristem. They don't get another ring of growth. So they can get a little fatter to support, but they don't have a secondary meristem. So they don't have the ring of meristem to grow like wider. Yeah. Well, it is, because when it grows, even though it grows on the inside, it's pushing the whole thing out. Because if I make another ring here, this goes out here, and the ring is right there. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, because actually you form another meristem after you get another ring of tissue. I'll explain that in a second. It's kind of weird. Okay, so just one more time. This is the vascular bundle. Xylem's on the inside, phloem's on the outside. Okay, xylem on the in, phloem on the out. In between is the meristem. Now this is a pain because biology has all kinds of like garbage vocabulary sometimes. Another name for the meristem in the stem is called cambium. I don't know why they need more than one word for everything. So this is actually going to be called the vascular cambium, but it is a meristem.
Wait, when is the meristem not called that?
Well, it's only called the vascular cambium when it's this particular meristem. Okay, and we're going to find something else that's called the cork cambium, which is the meristem that makes the cork, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. So meristem is kind of like a general term for stem cells in the plants, whereas the particular meristem has a name, vascular cambium. Yeah.
Why do you call it secondary xylem and secondary phloem?
It's going to make another ring. So this is primary right now.
Okay, when it's on the outside, it's primary, and then
No.
Oh, sorry.
This is primary xylem. This is primary phloem.
Okay.
When it makes a new ring, which I'll show you in a minute, then that is going to be the secondary xylem and the secondary phloem. Okay, but what we're going to find is it makes a new ring of phloem, and every year that phloem sloughs off. So you always just have basically one working ring of phloem because it keeps sloughing off. Whereas the xylem is the actual wood. That's what's making up the actual tree. Okay, so that's why it's really good. This is the hardest part. And I have a lot of pictures to kind of go back and forth to help make sure you understand this. Okay, so this is just what I was telling you. Basically, the xylem's the wood, the phloem is the bark. Although it's not just the phloem that's the bark, there's something called cork, which forms outside the phloem. So the bark is basically the phloem and the cork. Okay, and the wood is the xylem. So just to kind of get that straightened out, with it's going to help with pictures. So let's actually go to the pictures first. Obviously a schematic, and they've used some different language here, but basically let's start, and we'll kind of go back and forth between the pictures maybe, so it'll help you. This is called the heartwood, but this is the old xylem. Okay, that is the ring of xylem that was created like originally, and it's furthest to the inside. This is the vascular cambium. So remember that ring between the xylem and the phloem? So these, it just looks like they peeled it back like it's a piece of plywood or something, but it's made of cells, obviously. Okay, so these, the green, are the stem cells that make all the vascular tissue in the stem, the xylem and the phloem. So every year on the inside, it makes a new ring of xylem and a new ring of phloem on the outside. Okay, so this right now is the new ring, and that's the old ring. Okay, so we have two, but we see two rings of xylem, but only one of phloem. That's because this is the new phloem. The old phloem sloughs off. Okay, it's sloughs off like your skin sloughs off, like you just keep losing the cells. I mean, it's not that obvious because you lose something every day. Did you know that dust is like 90% dead cells? So, I mean, you don't see them because they're cells, but the phloem and the cork are just constantly, like the tree is shedding it, and so it doesn't ever get thicker. It always stays the same size, even though it makes a new ring every year. Okay, yes?
So what is the old xylem that becomes the wood?
It's the wood, and it doesn't work.
It doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything. It supports the tree. So it's for support. Remember, what kind of cells are the xylem? What kind of cells?
Water carrying cells.
Sclerenchyma. Okay? They're the super hard, double cell walled cells, whereas this is parenchyma. Okay? So that's why they slough off. They're not super hard, and they're not for support. And again, the xylem's for transporting water, and the phloem for food. It's sugar, fine. Okay? So this is sugar, this is water and minerals.
And so when you said that the xylem that becomes the heartwood it just kind of stops working?
Yeah.
But when you want a lot of water to be going in and out?
Okay. I was going to cover that later, but I'll cover it right now. Okay? This is the working ring of xylem. What do you notice about this ring versus that ring? Yeah, it's bigger, isn't it? It's bigger around because it's outside of the inner ring. Okay? So every time it makes a new ring, it's bigger, and the tree's bigger, but there's going to be more water because it's bigger ring. So the bigger the tree gets, because that ring is the working ring, it's going to get more water, which is what it needs. So when we do plant transport next week, I'll show you guys why that is. But what happens is the xylem is two kinds of cells. They have names, tracheids and vessel elements, but the bottom line is that they're hollow, dead sclerenchyma. So they don't really have cell parts anymore, and so they're great for transporting because they're hollow, okay? But what happens is, as the water moves up through them, when it doesn't move during the winter, because does anybody know, this is next week's lesson, but like, what's the force that makes the water come up from the... Yeah, I mean, it's cohesion and adhesion, but that's not really a force. That's kind of what keeps it moving. What actually makes it move is transpiration, is the evaporation out. So as it evaporates, as the water evaporates out of the leaves, that kind of makes a sucking kind of force, which pulls the water up from the roots. What happens in the winter? The leaves fall off, so the water doesn't evaporate, but when it doesn't evaporate, then no more water is coming up. And what happens is, I don't know if you guys have ever siphoned before, but once you form air bubbles, then water will not move through it. So the old, because it sat all winter, not being used basically, then water can't move through it, but we don't care because it's going to make a whole new ring.